All right, we are recording. Welcome, everybody. It's your commissioner, D Saint, and I got the owner with me, the Demons. Thank you so much for being here, Demons.
Anytime, Johnny. Ready to talk some football again.
Yeah, buddy. Um,
Yeah,
we
buddy.
we are talking. I want to make this very clear, okay? Everyone that's listening, listen up. Are you paying attention yet? Focus right now. This is season 8, okay? Not season 9. This is season 8. I'll say it again. Focus. We're not talking about season 9. And I'm not just talking about the Wolverines because there's a few owners that didn't realize we were talking about season 8. So don't feel bad about that. But yes, we are talking about season 8. And we are going to go over the awards and who deserves to win them and all that. And I'm going to pick the winners, and Demons are going to give their argument on who they think should win. And we're also going to take a look at the votes that the owners all voted for who they think should win, but we just give you the perception of voting, but we are actually going to make the picks ourselves, regardless of what the votes are. So we'll
You
leave.
mean yourselves, not ourselves.
Yes, myself. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Should should we go right into season eight's offensive MVP because that's the big one, or should we go leave that one for last? What do you think, Devens?
Let's go right into it. Let's start the better late than never season 8 awards with offensive MVP.
All right. So before
So,
before I give you my argument, I would love to hear your thoughts on who should win and why for the offensive
okay.
MVP.
I narrowed it down to two when I went and looked back and looked at the stats. We've got Pat Hall, quarterback of the 10-5 Wildcats, and Bryce Blocker, star running back of the top seed 11-4 Rhinos. Pat Hall was the highest rated QB in the league, just under 4,400 yards, 50 touchdown passes. 5-0, never been done before in the CSFL. I like Pat Hall for this award, but Bryce Blocker, what he did was also amazing. 1,960 rush yards, 28 rush touchdowns, and then 5 receiving touchdowns on top of that. Shatters the record for most touchdowns in a year. Was a fourth for the Rhinos in this year. It was a huge reason they finished top seed and their offense was so feared.
For sure.
But I can't overlook a quarterback throwing 50 touchdowns on a winning team. So this isn't garbage time. These are competitive touchdowns. 50
Yeah.
touchdowns in one season. The voters agree with me. The voters have it 7-1 for Pat Hall right now. 7-1 for Pat Hall, and the one is the Rhinos voting for their guy Bryce Blocker. So every owner that's not a Rhino thinks Pat Hall should win this award. I agree with them.
Great. No, that's good. That's a good argument, and everyone agrees with them. And this is where I'm going to make another argument just to play devil's advocate, and then I'll tell you who I'm going with. I'm going to make the argument for Bryce Locker. Everybody pay attention now. I know you're not going to agree with me. You might not like it. But this is my argument. Pat Hall had 50 touchdowns, yes. Jeannie Ingram also had 48 in that same season. Alonzo Atkins also had 44 in that same season. This season, Mike Archer, the rookie quarterback, has 43 touchdowns already with 2 games left. He might reach 50. I think that the 50 touchdown mark is going to be matched and broken, if not every single season from this season forward. We're going to see a lot of high 40s or 50, 51, 52 touchdowns coming up in these next couple seasons, in my opinion. He had the most passing yards, second most passing yards as well, ever in a season. But Jeannie Ingram got just a little bit more that season. So he didn't have the most passing yards in that season, but Bryce Locker had the most rushing touchdowns we've ever seen, and we haven't seen something like that since season 5. That's a record that I think is going to hold a lot longer. Bryce Locker also broke the record that Rico Bennett just broke, which took forever to break. As you can see on the screen, Willie Burnside from the Piranhas in season 3 had 1,800 yards, and it took forever for anyone to break that. And then Rico Bennett did it, and then the Rhinos did it the next season. And I do not see any running back getting 2,000 rushing yards. Right now, the highest right now is 1,600, and there's still 2 games left. Will someone get 400 yards in the next 2 games? Highly doubt it.
Yeah, probably not.
I think that Bryce Locker's record is more impressive, even though I'm the Wildcats and Pat Hall's my guy, and like if anyone should be voting for Pat Hall, it's me. But Bryce Locker, when you watch those games, he dominated. He had 2-3 touchdowns multiple games in a row, 200 yards multiple games in a row. There was only 2 games in the entire season where he didn't score a touchdown. And yes, that might go against his record and they can go, "Oh, well, he didn't score in those 2 games." Well, if anything, in my opinion, I think it's that he had 23 touchdowns in only 13 games then. Almost, like sort of speak. Like obviously he played in those games, and it was against the Gorillas and the Vipers, by the way, and it was early in the season week 2 and 3, and then he got on a streak and just didn't look back. The Rhinos dominated. Everybody knew they were going to run the ball, and they just couldn't stop Bryce Locker. The only big thing also that goes against Bryce Locker is that Randy Dorsey on his team, which is an honorable mention. Dave Rogers and Randy Dorsey should definitely get an honorable mention for Offensive MVP of the season, as both of them also got the single most receiving touchdowns in a season ever, which was 25, which was a really big deal. But Randy Dorsey was on the same team as Bryce Locker. So 25 touchdowns, 23 touchdowns. Bryce Locker was in the lead a lot in those games and got the ball at the end in the second half and was able to get a lot of reps and closed a lot of these games out. But he did close them out. There weren't games where they stopped Bryce Locker. Pat Hall, if you want to talk a little, I'll give a little bit of love to Pat Hall. Pat Hall has got to have one of the most stacked wide receiving cores with Dave Rogers, Troy Jackson, Dante McGrew. They had Torrey Sellers then, I believe, but they traded him. Marvin Black, but they traded him. They got some really, really good receivers out there, and they are geared towards the pass. You could make the argument that Pat Hall did more because he didn't have a running game. His running game was really, really weak, even though they finished second seed and the Rhinos finished first seed. I just see the quarterback position, someone breaking that record and getting that record and being around those same numbers, where I don't see someone getting I don't see someone getting 24 rushing touchdowns and 2,000 yards. I just don't see it. But what do you think about that once I kind of gave the Bryce Locker argument?
I think you made a very strong argument for Bryce Locker. Let's start with that. I also think you're underplaying what Pat Hall did and overplaying what Bryce Locker did. They both had phenomenal seasons. Sorry, you're not. You're. I think you're. I'm going to restate that. You're understating what Pat Hall did, and you've got Bryce Locker nailed. Like you did everything you said. I agree with about Bryce Locker. But right now, Mike Archer on a team that is in garbage time a lot more than a 10-5 successful team has 43 touchdowns with 2 games left, and he leads the league.
Yeah.
There's nobody close to him.
Yeah.
So he has to throw 7 touchdowns in his last 2 weeks to tie a record that a quarterback on a successful team ran.
Right.
I don't think 50 touchdowns is that easily achievable that you think it is. I think it's a harder milestone to hit than you believe. It is
right.
averaging over 3 touchdowns a game. It is basically, well, you play 15 games, right? So 3 touchdowns in every game. With 5 games, you throw 4. It is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount of touchdowns.
It is.
I also, on that same note, what Bryce Locker did with his 23 rush touchdowns, his 1,900 yards, his 5 receiving touchdowns. The only player in season 9 who can come close to what Bryce Walker did yardage wise is Bryce Walker, oddly enough. And no one's going to come close to his touchdowns. Like his total touchdowns are a league record at 28. That's
Right.
so there's 2 records that I think are going to stand after season 9, and that's Walker's and Pat Hall's. I think their touchdowns are both going to stand. They both had fantastic seasons.
Yeah.
I will say you said about the Wildcats and their style. They didn't have a run game. Well, the Wildcats, everyone knows the Wildcats is a throwing team. They've been a passing team almost as long as I've been in the league. As far as I've never really
For
viewed
sure.
them as a running team.
For sure.
So it's not unusual for that type of team to put up good passing numbers, and you have the quarterback there to do it. He still has to do it. He still has to get it done. And it doesn't
Right.
matter who's around him. I mean, he has to. He cannot be faulted for playing with good players. Same
Right.
with Bryce Walker. You're not going to fault Bryce Walker for having a good O-line, for having a good quarterback, and for having good receivers on the field with him, because that opens up the run game too. It works both ways. At the end of the day, I think what a quarterback doing that is like what both positions did is very hard to do. Quarterback to me is the most important position in football. Therefore, it's more impressive to me that what Pat Hall did. That's why I voted Pat Hall.
That's a great argument. And I'm going to reference what I talked to the Bears about. And you just said it. I think I wasn't sure if you said it just off air or just when we just got on air, but you're right when it comes to Bryce Locker may not even be the MVP on his team. As Randy Dorsey had 25 touchdowns, which was the record, and also had 1,899 yards, basically 1,900 yards, which is also the record. And he broke it by 300 yards. So Randy Dorsey absolutely had a incredible, legendary season, and so did Bryce Locker. If you take
And so
Bryce
did
Locker,
Atkins too. The Rhinos offense.
yeah,
Sorry to cut you off. I just
yeah,
want to
no,
get
you're
this in
right.
while I'm thinking of
You're right.
because the Rhinos. The statement I made was that Randy Dorsey. I didn't put him up in the voting because the Rhinos. You can only have one MVP on a team. You can't have 2 MVPs.
Right.
So I didn't think Randy Dorsey was the MVP of his team. I thought Bryce Locker was. That's why I put Bryce Locker instead of Dorsey. Anyway. Sorry, carry on.
No, you're right. My argument is that I was absolutely leaning towards Bryce Locker. And if I didn't have this conversation recently with the Bears, I think I would have picked Bryce Locker. But because of what he was saying, and I absolutely agree with him, and you hinted towards it too, is if you take Bryce Locker off that team is still going to do well. But if you take, because of how well, Lagoto Atkins and Randy Dorsey did, but if you take Pat Hall off the Wildcats, they might not make the playoffs. The Wildcats struggled with the quarterback position when they had Leroy Martin in there, and if they put in Hightower in there, they're a completely different team. They put in Alonzo Graham, they got from the Piranhas. They put him in there, and it's a completely different team. Pat Hall is the Superman on his team, and he is the MVP on his team, and I think he is the MVP of the league as he is the most important player to the Wildcats, where Bryce Locker, I don't know, he is. I can't say he's not, man. I really want to pick Bryce Locker because I don't think it'll ever be done again. I don't think anyone's getting 28 touchdowns and 2,000 rushing yards. I just don't see it as their defenses get stronger. I think it's a harder feat. It's a harder accomplishment to do it on the ground. I just feel that way just because it's such a passing league. Some people think it's a running league. In my opinion, it's a passing league. I don't know. I think Pat Hall's record's going to be broken, but was he the most valuable player? I'm going to say he was. I'm going to give it to Pat Hall. Before this thing started, I was giving it to Bryce Locker, but I think we're going to give it to Pat Hall for season 8 MVP, offensive MVP.
well deserved, and that doesn't take away from Bryce Walker's achievement at all, and he'll still go up in the record book with his season 2. So it's not like he doesn't get anything for it. He's got his record behind his name. Pat Hall's the right choice here, Johnny.
Thank you for reassuring reassuring me, because I was definitely contemplating it for sure.
So we've got 4 other awards to give out.
Yeah, let's
We'll go to defensive player of the year.
Well, let's stay offensive just because it's in order, I guess.
Sure.
Okay,
so
season 8 offensive rookie of the year. Give me your thoughts on who you think should win it and why.
So I had Cedric Burley. When looking at the numbers, Cedric Burley of the Gorillas with his 1,371 rush yards, 16 touchdowns, and then 3 receiving touchdowns, versus Luis Sherman, 71 catches for 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns, are my 2 candidates. I voted for Luis Sherman. I think that they were the better team in season 8, and I think when you're playing games, it's the same argument about how are you getting your touchdowns? Like Luis Sherman was a contributor on a 10-5 team that was competitive all through the season. The Gorillas, they were. Well, you know what? I actually don't remember if the Gorillas or not in season 8. They may have. Gorillas had improved in season 8 versus season 7, and they're still not. I just don't think Cedric Burley impressive as Luis Sherman. I just think that that's a veteran. They both had better numbers, but Sherman, I find it harder for a wide receiver to do that than as a rookie.
Yeah.
So I picked Luis Sherman.
Yeah, Luis Sherman also had Jackie Wilson on his team, and he did very, very well that season as well. And also, Jeannie Ingram was throwing him the ball, the legendary Jeannie Ingram, arguably the best quarterback if that's ever did it. He's going with a brand new rookie here, and he got 71 catches, 1,400 yards, and 16 touchdowns as the secondary receiver. He absolutely lit it up every single game he was in. The Scorpions wide receiver just played absolutely phenomenal. Cedric Burley gets a little bit of love for sure with those 16 touchdowns and 3 receiving. The Gorillas did not make the playoffs, I'm pretty sure, and the Scorpions did make the playoffs, but the Gorillas, the only reason why they were able to stay alive was because of Cedric Burley. They drafted Cedric Burley as well. He had a great rookie bowl. He had a great performance in the Rookie Bowl, and they picked him up and they started him, and he played phenomenal and is still playing really good at a high level for the Gorillas. It's just their quarterback that's really been struggling right now, Ismail Pitts, and their wide receiving core. Cedric Burley was electrifying to watch in season 8. He was the only real light in the Gorillas franchise besides their defense. They got some really great defensive players. Especially now. They got Andrew Brooks there, Andre Brooks, and they got Vincent there, Vincent Barry. And they got 2 really, really good corners and some really good defensive linemen. But I have to give it to the Scorpions wide receiver rookie, Luis Sherman, as he did it, and he did it on a more consistent basis. And the 71 catches is way up there as well. Let's take a look where that is all time. Because I think it's up there. Yeah, like Luis Sherman was in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So he was in the top 10 for receptions in his rookie season, which is pretty impressive. Jackie Wilson actually got 88 touchdowns in the same season, or 88 catches. Sorry, 88 touchdowns, 88 catches, which was incredible because I don't think anyone was going to beat Barry Perkins' 83. But the Scorpions, look, they're on this list quite a
Never
few
say never
times.
about these
Well, never. I know. Obviously, the games and the games are obviously going to expand, but it just feels like that sometimes when they blow it out of the park, right? But the Scorpions, look how many times they're on their list with so many different receivers: Torrey Sellers and Lewis Sherman and Jackie Wilson and Jason Tupea. They definitely get a lot of receptions in the receiving core there for that team. But I'm going to go with Lewis Sherman as well, and there's no controversy there. All right. Let's
Lewis Sherman is the offensive rookie of the year.
Yes, sir. Okay, and now we'll talk about defensive MVP.
Let's move on. I think this one has some controversy too about who should win this one. The voting is in favor of Irv Orlando. So we have three candidates: Cameron, Irv Orlando, and Anderson. Backers for Rhinos and Wildcats, respectively. Guys are their numbers are similar across. James led the league in tackles 78, but then got 76 and 75. Other two, they the same, almost the same amount of tackles, is almost the same amount of sacks.
Yeah.
It's really about, and I think I said in the previous video, it's who was the important for their team. They're going to pick a winner from these numbers. They're so close. I think the Ryan.
Oh, you're cutting in and out. You're cutting in and out there a little bit, Demons. Hey, Demons, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. You're
Okay.
saying about who was more important to their team.
Okay. So, yeah. So I said in a previous video that I think defensive MVP, in my opinion, comes down to who is the most valuable for their team. Aside, because these numbers are pretty much equal. You can split hairs about which stat's more important all day. The bottom line is one of these guys was reason that their defense was so successful. I know that the Wildcats have a lot of good players on the defense. So do the Vipers. So do the Rhinos. They all have fat defenses. But Irv Orlando they were the top seed. This guy was the playmaker, in my opinion, that deserved the defensive MVP.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. There's no argument there. James Cameron really is a force to be reckoned with. He's also a force to be reckoned with this season too, in season 9. But we're talking about season 8, everybody. Make sure you stay focused. Season 8, James Cameron really was a force to be reckoned with, but he just doesn't have that defensive touchdown. But that shouldn't really sway the votes too much because James Cameron was an absolute leader on the number 1 defense in the league, right? Glenn Anderson is an absolute force. These 3 guys are all middle linebackers, by the way, if you're not sure. And for the viewers that are watching, I got the stats up on the screen that the Demons provided here. Those 2 defensive touchdowns really make me lean towards Irv Orlando and Glenn Anderson. But Glenn Anderson had a phenomenal season with a lot less help, in my opinion. I feel like the Rhinos definitely have a lot more stars on their defense. Alex Campbell, Dante Terry, Xavier Dawson, Jesse Johnson. There's quite a few of them on there. Irv Orlando really had a lot of. I don't know if the forced fumbles is on there or not, but I thought he had a few forced fumbles as well, but maybe he didn't. Irv Orlando really was a force out there to be reckoned with, and I really do feel like if you took Orlando away, that they wouldn't be the same. But I still feel that way about Glenn Anderson as well. Originally, I was going with Bryce Locker, and I was going with Irv Orlando, or and Glenn Anderson, should I say? One for the Rhinos and one for the Wildcats, but it might actually be the exact opposite here, as Irv Orlando was really the standout player in that season. But all 3 of these guys deserve it, man. Glenn Anderson, James Cameron, Irv Orlando, they're the top of the at their position for sure. So I guess we're gonna go with
Yeah, there's
Orv
no
Orlando.
wrong choice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's no wrong choice. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, no. You're good. You go right ahead. I trust your thoughts and your opinion. I don't want to ramble too much either. But Irv Orlando, I
Well,
think, is the force here.
yeah, the voting agrees with you. 5 votes Orlando, 2 votes Cameron, 1 vote Anderson. So we've got, yeah, I mean, the general consensus is that Orlando is the MVP here.
Yeah. Perfect. So we'll go with that. So
All
Irv
right.
Orlando gets defensive MVP of season 8. And we'll take a now our look at our second last award. We still got head coach of the year coming up. But we're going to look at the defensive rookie of the year. They got 3 players here: Brian Blazer, Jason Smith, and James Walker. Who do you think should win and why, Demons?
Well, this one's a little more diverse than the last defensive award. We've got 3 different positions here, which
Right.
is good to see. I mean, 2 of them are linebackers, but I believe James Walker's an outside linebacker, if I'm not
He is.
mistaken. Yeah, so Brian Blazer, 6 interceptions as a rookie is phenomenal. That's 46 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, a sack, a defensive touchdown, 11 defended passes. Like, this guy had a great year. The voting has 0 votes for him. It's not that his numbers aren't great. It's that I think the other 2 just had more impressive years than him. And I don't think Brian Blazer, unless you've got you might have an argument otherwise, Johnny. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but I don't think it's going to go to Brian Blazer. Um, Jason Smith, who was my vote, was similar in statistics to some of the top candidates for defensive MVP, let alone a rookie.
Sure.
74 tackles, 9 tackles for losses, which was close to the top in the league. 4 interceptions as a rookie, 5 defended passes, and 2 forced fumbles. This guy was a machine out there for the Piranhas and a huge, huge force for their defense.
Yeah.
I like him for defensive rookie of the year, but James Walker on the Tigers. Now, I know you're probably not thinking Tigers when you're thinking defense, because they were a new team, and new teams always struggle with defense because they haven't been able to build their roster up. But this guy broke the record for sacks as a
Yeah.
rookie.
Wow.
8. 3 defended passes, a forced fumble, 4 tackles for losses. Up there for tackles with 62. I mean, he's not that far behind. He's 1 less a game than some of the top guys. He was the 4th too. So in my opinion, it should go to one of Walker or Smith, based on the voting, because they're very close.
Wow.
Walker actually has more votes. He's got 5, and Smith has 4. So, love to hear what you got to think on this one, Johnny.
Man, how do you not want to give it to James Walker? I think that them having a very big losing record is a big reason why no one wants to kind of lean towards Walker. If James Walker and the Tigers had a winning record at all, I think this would be a slam dunk. I think it would be James Walker here. But since he didn't have a really good record, which I know isn't necessarily the defense's fault, but they are still allowing scores, 8 sacks is a really big deal. And it's never been done in 7 seasons prior to season 8. So I think it's a really big deal and it should not be overlooked. But I'm not going to pick James Walker just because of how much the Tigers got dominated. He was the one man Superman on that team, but he still wasn't able to turn the tides into the Tigers' favor. Jason Smith, like you said, a force to be reckoned with. He was a machine out there for the Piranhas. You are absolutely right. I remember watching those Piranhas games a lot, and it was always Jason Smith making those plays. He's a really, really young, well, he's a rookie, obviously, but he's a really, really young player, and he just dominated in the middle of the field. And the Piranhas really have never seen anything like it. In their franchise history, they've never had a middle linebacker like that that dominated for them. Um, but Brian Blazer, and it's crazy how you tell me the votings because for me, this is how can you not pick Brian Blazer? The Scorpions made the
I love
playoffs.
this. I
he
love
t-
that's
he.
Bryce Locker all over again right here. I
I
love
think
it.
I think differently than everybody. I formulate my own opinions. Hey, Brian Blazer, the Trailblazer. This guy, we were talking about him every week. He had 6 interceptions, I believe, still with 3 games left. And we were rooting for him to get the interception to break the record that has stand for, feels like, in CSFL history forever, since season
Yeah,
2.
6 players with 6 interceptions. He's tied for the records with 6 other players, with 5 other players.
Which is incredible. Like, that's a record that has never been broken since Aaron Sellers set the record. A lot of teams have tied it, but like I said before in other videos, that you don't break it. You don't got the record unless you break it. Okay, if you tie the record, then
If Aaron Sellers though
yeah.
did it in season 2.
And
Season 2,
how many games?
what, only 10 teams, I think.
9 games. So he did
Nine
it.
games.
He did it
Give
in
him 6 more games.
games.
Yeah, that's a legendary number there.
That's a legendary number. So if anybody breaks that, they might even get defensive MVP if they're able to have 7 turnovers just on their own. By the way, he took one to the house as well, and I think that's the defining factor here. He also had 11 pass deflections. He was on the left side of the field, the right side of the defense. He was playing the second corner, so he was getting all the reps, and he was a big reason why the Scorpions were playing so well in Season 8, and they're also the big reason why they're not doing well this year because they moved Brian Blazer around. He played amazing on that left side of the field and the right side of the defense, and I am going to go with Brian Blazer because he had the pass deflections, the 6 interceptions, a sack, a defensive touchdown, lots of tackles. If you take Brian Blazer off that team in Season 8, the Scorpions are what they are in Season 9.
And you know what? Brian Blazer, yeah, they were a 10-5 team, very successful team. I actually, you win. I can't count. I'm not going to counter argument that. I agree with you. I don't agree with. I would change my vote to Brian Blazer based on what you said. I actually, the 6 interceptions for a rookie to do is phenomenal, and
Yeah.
I think I did not quite. I didn't value that enough. To tell you the truth. So I agree. Brian Blazer, great pick.
Jason Smith is amazing. He played phenomenal. When you watch the games, he just crushed everybody. The 9 tackles for a loss, the 4 interceptions, 5 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles. Jason Smith has a strong argument here. But but between Brian Blazer and James Walker is really the big ones because of those 8 sacks and that 6 interceptions, and he brought one of them to the house. That defensive touchdown was a big part of it. It would have to go to one of those two, and James Walker was not able to single-handedly bring the Tigers into a winning record or to really win any of those games. He was just trying to put out the fire. And he put out a little bit of fire, but he couldn't get it done, which I don't blame James Walker, which they actually traded him, I believe now. He's on the Rhinos. Brian Blazer
Oh, I did
was,
not know that.
I'm pretty sure, and Brian Blazer's now, he's an incredible player, and he's the big reason why the Scorpions were as good as they were in Season 8, and again, a big reason why they're not doing so well here in Season 9. So our next award is Head Coach of the Year, and I don't think we have any arguments here. What's your thoughts on who should win it and why?
5 teams were 10-5 in
Wow.
in season 8. One team managed to separate themselves from that pack, and they happened to be the defending champs, so they did it with a target on their back. My pick is the 11-4 Rhinos, who had also just 2 candidates for MVPs as well, with Bryce Locker and Irv Orlando here,
Yeah.
as well as obviously we talked about Dorsey and Atkins and how well they played. This guy put his players in positions to be successful. The Rhinos is my choice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Um, the Wildcats, the Vipers, even the Scorpions definitely had a good claim for it. But the Rhinos, you can't talk enough about how great the Rhinos really are. And I know his head is big enough and no one wants to hear it. And everyone, when they hear me talk about the Rhinos, they want to throw up in their mouth, I know. But the Rhinos really made some amazing play calls, and they also took a lot of risks offensively and defensively. They they would make plays and put in game plans every week where he would literally it literally happened at least 6 times I can think of in season 8 alone. Never mind if I went back and did more research, where he moved a guy, put his first or second receiver or first or second corner in the slot, or moved him to the one side and moved him specifically against someone, made a game plan, and that player got a touchdown and that player got an interception, or that like he literally was incredible what he was doing, and he was just, it was like borderline lucky and extremely intelligent moves, but you can't get lucky that many times. The Rhinos put the time in. The Rhinos really wanted to win. Like you said, he had a target on his back. We've never, ever seen a team win a championship game and make the playoffs since the Vipers. No other team has ever did it. And not only did he make the playoffs, but he finished as the number 1 seed. Yes, he's the first ever number 1 seed to go to the championship. And yes, he did win the championship, but we're not considering the playoffs here. We're just talking regular season. He was the number 1 seed. He had the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 running back, the number 1 middle linebacker. Kind of hard to argue. The Rhinos, they really are the masters of the game plan and are really changing the game and how other owners are approaching the game, similar to what the Demons have done. I remember the Piranhas really invented the West Coast cover 2 formula, and they were coming up with these great game plans, and that's why they won head coach of the year multiple times. The Demons, I believe, have also won head coach of the year because they really changed the game with that Jacksonville offense and that New England defense, and they really changed how owners look at the game, and I really think the Rhinos did that in season 8.
Absolutely right. The Rhinos are constantly evolving. They're that type of team that you look at and they don't look like they're ever satisfied. And it's a great award for them. Congratulations to the Rhinos.
Yeah. So the first season 1 was the Cobras, 1 head coach, and then it was Piranhas in season 2 and Piranhas in season 3, Vipers in season 4, Gators in season 5, Wildcats in season 6, and Demons in season 7, and now Rhinos. You've done it all, won the championship, won multiple championships, won MVPs, and now finally wins his first ever Coach of the Year. Thank you so much, Demons.
It's well deserved. It's a hard award to win because you can't just win top seed to win it.
That's right.
Years past, it's been what coach turned their team around the best, or what coach made really good off-season moves and adjustments during the season as well. There's way more factors. There's a lot of factors that go into it. You just can't argue against what the Rhinos did in season 8.
Yeah. And they're obviously doing the same here in season 9, and they're doing a phenomenal as well. So they definitely been really, really consistent with it. That's for sure. Any final thoughts, Demons, on the votes? And do you think we got any of them wrong? Any controversial ones?
Absolutely did not get any of them wrong. They're all right. Bang on. Congratulations to the owners who got award winners. Great choices, Johnny.
Thank you so much, Demons, for hanging out with me. I love making these videos with you.
Anytime, Johnny.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and enjoy the rest of the games in Season 9, as it's a big season coming up. Thanks, guys.